Okay, so in this video, we're going to talk about how to solve with roots, mainly square roots and cube roots, or squaring and cubing type equations. So first, let's review equations we do know how to solve. Remember our basic steps. Okay, we draw that balance scale because when solving an equation, we have to remember that whatever we do to one side, we do to the other. Our overall goal in solving an equation is to isolate the variable, get it by itself. Right now, x is not by itself. It has the plus 2 over here. So how do I get rid of the plus 2? So remember step 1, we're going to use the inverse. The inverse of addition is subtraction. Okay. Step 2, balance the scale. If I put minus 2 there, I have to put minus 2 there. Then step 3 is to simply do the math. Remember, every time we have an inverse, those things zero out, they go away, so I'm left with just x, which was my goal to isolate the variable. 11 minus 2 is 9. And then, of course, step 4, check your answer. 9 plus 2 is, in fact, 11. Remember with this one, with multiplication, our inverse is division. Balance the scale. Do the math. Multiplication and division cancel each other out. 12 divided by 3 is 4. Check my answer. 3 times 4 is 12. So that's just a quick review on solving in general, what we already know how to do. Okay? Now let's talk about what does that look like if I have a square, an equation with a squared. So x squared equals 49. Okay, and let's try one with a cubed. X cubed equals 8. All right, same steps that we just did. The idea of the balance scale. Whatever you do to one side, you're going to do to the other. So step 1 was use the inverse. Okay, what is the inverse of squaring a number? That's the square root. So I'm going to use the inverse and square roots at this side. Step 2, balance the scale. If I square root this side, I need to square root that side. Step 3, do the math. Remember, anything in its inverse cancel each other out. So the square root and the squared are going to cancel each other out, and I'm left with x. Over here, do the math. Square root of 49 is 7. But remember, with square roots, there's 2 answers. It's also negative 7. Now, you're not necessarily going to get docked right now for not doing the negative 7, but it is something that I want you aware of since this is our first time going through this. Technically, there are 2 answers here. Check my answer. 7 squared is 49. Negative 7 squared is 49. Same thing with a cubed. The inverse of cubing is cube rooting, which remember is that square root with a little 3 there. Okay? Use the inverse, balance the scale. I have to cube root that side. Do the math. Cube root and cubing are going to cancel each other out to give me x, and the cube root of 8 is 2. Remember with cube roots, we don't have 2 answers like square roots, so this is just 2. Check my answer. 2 to the third is, in fact, 8. So it's as simple as that. Now, what happens if we go the other way? What happens if I give you the square root of x equals 9? Okay? The inverse of the square root, just like square root is the inverse of squaring, squaring is the square root of square rooting, the inverse of square rooting, just like addition is the inverse of subtraction, subtraction is the inverse of addition. So the inverse here is to square it, balance the scale, do the math. Those cancel. 9 squared is 81. Same thing if I have a cube root. The cube root of x equals 7. The inverse of cube rooting is to cube. Balance my scale. Do the math. Those cancel to give me x. 7 to the third is 343. And then, of course, I can check my answers with those. So solving these equations are just like solving any other equation we've ever learned. Use the inverse, balance the scale, do the math, check your answer, and yes, you can use calculators.